Welcome to Agent Amigos Talk. Today, Terence Crawford, the Undisputed Art of Boxing. This is Terence Crawford. Sit back, this is going to be worth your time. Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about a man who doesn't just fight, he paints a masterpiece every time he steps between those ropes. I'm talking about Terence Crawford, a name that resonates with power, precision, and pure dominance in the sport of boxing. You know, in a sport filled with personalities, trash talk, and drama, Crawford stands out as a quiet, almost stoic figure, but his fists do the loudest talking. Born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska, he's not from a traditional boxing hotbed like New York or Los Angeles, but he's put his city on the map in a way no one else has. When you think of Crawford, you think of a guy who's been overlooked, underrated, and sometimes even ignored by the mainstream media, but every time he fights, he forces the world to pay attention. His nickname, Bud, might sound friendly, but in the ring, he's an assassin, a calculated killer who breaks down opponents with a cold, methodical approach. In this talk, we're going to dive deep into the life and Terence Crawford was born on September 28, 1987, in Omaha, Nebraska, a city more known for its steaks and Warren Buffett than for producing world-class boxers. But from a young age, Crawford showed an affinity for fighting, often getting into scraps and showing a natural toughness that would later become his trademark. His family life wasn't easy. He grew up in a rough neighborhood where survival was key, and boxing became his way out. He was introduced to the sport by his mother, who wanted to channel his energy into something positive, and he immediately fell in love with it. At the age of 14, he walked into the local gym, and the rest, as they say, is history. His amateur career was impressive, racking up a record of 58 wins and 12 losses, which, while not perfect, showcased his rapid development. He won the National Golden Gloves in 2006 and the U.S. Amateur Championship in 2007, proving he was among the best in the country. However, he fell short of making the 2008 Olympic Team A. In 2008, Terence Crawford made his professional debut, and it didn't take long for him to start turning heads. Fighting in the lightweight division, he was a relative unknown, but his talent was undeniable. He won his first fight by knockout, and he quickly racked up a string of victories, dispatching opponents with a mix of speed, power, and technical skill that was rare for a young fighter. His team, led by his longtime trainer Brian McIntyre, was careful in their matchmaking, but they also weren't afraid to test him. As he moved through the ranks, he faced increasingly tough opposition, and he passed every test with flying colors. By 2013, he had compiled a record of 20-0, and he was ready for his first world title shot. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were struggles behind the scenes, including promotional issues and a lack of big-name opponents willing to face him. This was a recurring theme in his career, as Crawford's style was so difficult that many avoided him. In March 2014, Terence Crawford got his first world title shot against Scottish fighter Ricky Burns for the WBO lightweight title, and it was a night that changed his life. The fight took place in Glasgow, in Burns' backyard, in front of a hostile crowd. But Crawford didn't care, he was there to take what was his. He started slowly, feeling out Burns, but as the fight progressed, he began to take over. His superior speed and accuracy were evident, and he dropped Burns in the fifth round with a beautiful right hand. The crowd went silent, and from that point on, it was all Crawford. He dominated the rest of the fight, winning a unanimous decision and capturing his first world title. It was a coming-out party for the young American, and boxing fans around the world took notice. This was the moment when people started to realize that this kid from Omaha was special. He wasn't just a champion, he was a future superstar. After that, he made 2 successful defenses of his title, stopping his. When Terence Crawford moved up to super lightweight, he found a division full of talent, but he made it his own in record time. He immediately challenged for a world title, facing Thomas Delorme in April 2015 for the vacant WBO super lightweight title. It was a competitive fight early, but Crawford's class showed, and he stopped Delorme in the 6th round to win the title. But he wasn't satisfied with just one belt, he wanted to unify. He faced another champion in Victor Postal in July 2016, a fight that was billed as a unification bout for the WBO and WBC titles. It was a tactical battle, but Crawford proved his superiority, winning a clear decision and adding the WBC belt to his collection. Now, he was a 2-belt champion, but he still had a goal, to become the undisputed champion at 140 pounds. He faced another champion in Julius Ndongo in August 2017, a unified champion who held the IBF and WBA titles. Crawford put on a stunning performance, knocking Ndongo out in the third round. Moving up to welterweight was a big step for Terence Crawford, but he made it look easy. He made his debut at 147 pounds in June 2018, facing Jeff Horn, who had just lost to Manny Pacquiao but was still a legitimate world champion. Crawford dominated Horn, stopping him in the ninth round to win the WBO welterweight title. It was a statement. He was here to stay, and he was ready to take over the division. Over the next few years, he defended his title against a string of challengers, but the big fights were elusive. He was widely considered the best welterweight in the world, but he couldn't get the other champions, like Errol Spence Jr., to fight him. Promotional politics and network affiliations were holding up the biggest fights in the sport. But Crawford remained patient, knowing that his time would come. Finally, in July 2023, the fight that everyone wanted was made: Crawford vs. Errol Spence Jr. for the undisputed welterweight championship. It was a super fight, pitting the 2B. One of the most fascinating aspects of Terence Crawford's boxing style is his ability to switch hit, meaning he can fight effectively from both orthodox and southpaw stances. This is incredibly rare at the highest level, and it gives him a huge advantage over his opponents. Most fighters are comfortable in one stance, and they spend their entire careers perfecting their craft from that side. But Crawford is a natural right-hander who learned to fight as a southpaw, and he's equally dangerous from both. This ability confuses opponents, as they have to constantly adjust their game plan. When Crawford switches stances in the middle of a fight, it's not just for show, it's a strategic move that changes the angles, the timing, and the power of his punches. He can throw a jab from the orthodox stance, then switch to southpaw and throw a devastating left hook that opponents don't see coming. This unpredictability makes him nearly impossible to prepare for. Trainers can study his fights, but throughout his career, Terence Crawford has had many memorable victories, but some stand out as truly signature moments. His win over Ricky Burns in 2014 was his arrival on the world stage, but it was his performance against Victor Postal in 2016 that showed he could outbox a skilled technician. However, the fight that really put him on the map was his 2017 unification bout against Julius Ndongo, where he knocked him out with a body shot that left the boxing world buzzing. That shot was so perfect that it was replayed millions of times. Then there was his stoppage of Jeff Horn, a tough, rugged fighter who had given Manny Pacquiao trouble, but Crawford made him look ordinary. But the pinnacle of his career came in 2023 when he faced Errol Spence Jr. in the most anticipated fight of the year. Crawford didn't just win, he put on a boxing clinic, dropping Spence 3 times and stopping him in the 9th round. It was a performance that will be remembered for years to come. He also had AS. Despite his incredible success, Terence Crawford's career hasn't been without its challenges and controversies. One of the biggest issues has been his promotional situation. He was signed with Top Rank for many years, but he often criticized them for failing to secure the big fights he wanted. He publicly feuded with Top Rank CEO Bob Arum, and there were times when he was sidelined for months, unable to find opponents willing to fight him. This led to frustration, as he was in his prime and couldn't get the fights that would define his legacy. The lack of big-name opponents also hurt his public profile. He was often overlooked in pound-for-pound rankings because he wasn't fighting the top names. In 2021, he became a free agent, but he still struggled to make the biggest fights happen. There were also controversies surrounding his trainer, Brian McIntyre, who had some legal issues, and there were questions about whether Crawford was being managed properly. Additionally, Crawford has Terence Crawford's legacy in boxing is already secured, but his impact on the sport goes beyond his titles and victories. He's a pioneer in the 4-belt era, being the first male boxer to become undisputed champion in 2 divisions. That's a feat that will be remembered for generations. He's also inspired a new generation of fighters from Omaha and the Midwest, showing that you don't have to come from a traditional boxing city to make it big. His style is unique and difficult to replicate, but he's influenced many young fighters to work on their versatility, especially the ability to switch stances. His dominance has also raised the bar for what it means to be a champion. He's not just a belt collector, he's a fighter who wants to prove he's the best by fighting the best. His win over Spence was a landmark event in boxing, as it finally gave fans the fight they wanted and showed that when the best fight the best, it can live up to the hype. Crawford's impact is also felt in the biz scene. Behind every great fighter, there's a business side, and Terence Crawford has navigated his career with a keen sense of business. For most of his career, he was with Top Rank, but his relationship with them was often strained. He felt that they weren't doing enough to secure the biggest fights, and he was vocal about it. In 2021, he became a free agent, and he's since worked with various promoters on a fight-by-fight basis. This has given him more control over his career, but it's also made it harder to make big fights happen, as the boxing world is often divided by promotional and network loyalties. Crawford has also been involved in negotiations for super fights, including the long-awaited bout with Errol Spence Jr. That fight was finally made possible when both fighters agreed to work together, and it was a massive financial success. Crawford reportedly earned a career-high purse for that fight, proving that he's a pay-per-view draw. He's also been smart about his brand, endorsing P. At 36 years old, Terence Crawford is still at the top of his game, but time is not on his side. He's achieved almost everything there is to achieve in boxing, but there are still a few super fights that fans are dreaming of. The most obvious one is a rematch with Errol Spence Jr., but after his dominant win, that fight doesn't seem as appealing. Crawford has expressed interest in moving up to 154 pounds to challenge for a title in a third division. A fight against Jermall Charlo, the undisputed super welterweight champion, would be a huge event. Charlo is a big, strong fighter, and it would be a test of Crawford's ability to move up in weight. Another potential super fight is against the winner of the Canelo Alvarez vs. David Benavidez, but that's at 168, which might be too much for Crawford. However, he said he's willing to fight anyone, and he's not afraid of challenges. There's also the possibility of a fight against Virgil Ortiz Jr., a young undefeated contender who has been called. Outside the ring, Terence Crawford is a family man and a pillar of his community. He's married to his high school sweetheart, and they have 3 children together. He's often seen spending time with his family, and he credits them for keeping him grounded. Despite his success, he's remained humble and approachable, often interacting with fans and signing autographs. He's also known for his generosity, especially in his hometown of Omaha. He's hosted community events, given back to local schools, and supported youth boxing programs. He's also been involved in charity work, including efforts to combat hunger and provide resources for underprivileged children. Crawford has used his platform to speak out on social issues, but he's also been careful to maintain a low profile, letting his actions speak for themselves. He's not one for flashy cars or extravagant lifestyles. He prefers a simple life, focusing on his family and his craft. His personality is often described as quiet and reserved. In conclusion, Terence Crawford has proven time and time again that he is not just a great fighter, but one of the greatest of his era. His skills are unmatched, his achievements are historic, and his impact on the sport is undeniable. He's the undisputed champion in 2 weight classes, a feat that few can claim. He's beaten the best, and he's done it in style. But is he the greatest of this era? It's a question that sparks debate, but the evidence is overwhelming. His technical brilliance, his versatility, his ring IQ, and his ability to rise to the occasion set him apart from his peers. He's faced adversity, both in and out of the ring, and he's overcome it all. He's been avoided by many fighters because they knew they couldn't beat him. He's been underappreciated by the media, but his performances have forced them to take notice. He's a once-in-a-generation talent, and we're privileged to witness his career. As he continues to fight, he's adding to his legacy, but even if he retired. Audience Q&A, your questions answered. Continuing the same Agent Amigos talk about Terence Crawford. Audience Q&A, your questions answered. Here is the deeper story. Think about what we have covered so far. Now, extending the discussion, every major point in this talk connects to how Terence Crawford shapes the way we see the world. The examples are everywhere once you start looking. Experts and everyday people alike are talking about this right now, and the conversation is only getting bigger. Here are 3 more angles worth considering in detail. First, the history. How did we get here? Second, the present. What is happening right now that most people miss? Third, the future. Where is this heading, and what should you do about it? Let's take each one in turn and go deeper than the headlines. That is what makes this topic so compelling. It is not just information, it is a shift in perspective. And when you finish this talk, you will see Terence Crawford differently, guarantee. Deep dive, key concepts explained. Continuing the same Agent Amigos talk about Terence Crawford. Deep dive, key concepts explained. Here is the deeper story. think about what we have covered so far. Now, extending the discussion, every major point in this talk connects to how Terence Crawford shapes the way we see the world. The examples are everywhere once you start looking. Experts and everyday people alike are talking about this right now, and the conversation is only getting bigger. Here are 3 more angles worth considering in detail. First, the history, how did we get here? Second, the present, what is happening right now that most people miss? Third, the future, where is this heading, and what should you do about it? Let's take each one in turn and go deeper than the headlines. That is what makes this topic so compelling. It is not just information, it is a shift in perspective. And when you finish this talk, you will see Terence Crawford differently, guaranteed. Thank you for watching Agent Amigos. If this talk sparked something in you, hit like, subscribe to Agent Amigos, and share it with one person who needs to hear it. Knowledge is better when it is shared. See you at the next talk.